My name is Onye. I'm from the National Film and Video Foundation, also known as the NFVF. The NFVF, yeah, okay, I'll get into that. But anyway, this is the topic that Lola just said, that he gracefully blessed me with. It wasn't my idea, it's his idea. So if it doesn't go according to plan, you can point fingers at him. Uh, Block access, allow access, let permitted, allow access. Yeah. Okay, so NFPF is, we're an agency of the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. Um, we haven't just arrived, we've been around since 1997, but we have been basically given the task of enabling the equitable growth of the film and audiovisual industry. So it's not just about creating funding, but enabling the growth of the industry in an equitable way. So sometimes that creates people that appreciate the work you do, and sometimes it doesn't, because not everyone is a fan of equity. And yeah, so that's essentially our mandate, to promote and develop the film industry. So we're an agency, like many agencies under DSAC, you have the NAC, the National Arts Council. They focus on performing arts. So we are basically behind the scenes. They do everything in front of the scenes, performing arts, dancing, singing, theater. We stick to script writing, directing, cinematography, and all of those things. So that's what we focus on. And we have a number of strategic objectives, but ultimately they all center around certain pillars that we have. So we fund films across the value chain. So from ideation, script development to production, post-production, and then marketing and distribution. And then central to all of that is the skills development that we do. So we offer bursaries for local study, for international study. We also do lots of training programs. We train trainers. And all of that is underpinned by the research that we do. We create insights for the industry. A lot of the research reports that we do are used internationally. So there's quite a lot that we do. I have our acting legal and compliance manager. She also deals with research, and our legal and compliance officer here with us. We have our research manager. We have our marketing officer, marketing coordinator. So it's just a few people from the from the larger ops team that deal with a lot of the funding that we do. So who do we do it for? So we do it for, yes, the industry, but we tier people. Because everyone has a wonderful idea that's going to change the world, but not everyone has had that wonderful idea for the same duration of time. So people are tiered. So, for example, for production, filmmaker, you've been doing this for over 10 years or something like that, or rather, if you have 2 to 3 commercially viable films, then you're tier 1, and it cascades down. So tier 3 is essentially someone who's done one short film. For film festivals, tier 1 is someone who's had a film festival for over 10 years. Tier 2, between 5 and 10 years. Tier 3 is essentially someone who's new to the game and has been doing this for less than 5 years. And then the bursaries, again, we do national bursaries, international bursaries. Our international bursaries, post-grad, we tend to focus on things that you can't study here in South Africa. But nationally, you can study, directing, cinematography, script writing at any institution. And in terms of how we're tracking, we have lots of research, which we not only track the industry, we track ourselves, because it's good to be self-reflective. Madeleine earlier was talking about data, and I think data is also important to the actual entity itself. Because it's all good and well to say this is what we do, but you have to actually tabulate and explain the nature of how we do it. So our mandate, like I said, is to create the equitable growth. So we must measure them. How are we funding? Are we doing it in an equitable way? So over the past 5 years, we funded over 80% Black individuals, just under 52% are female, 86% of we funded are either beginners or the intermediary. So the work that we've done to a large scale is very developmental, and that speaks to the quality of a lot of the films that come out of South Africa. So other countries such as Nigeria, they're very focused on volume. When they resurrected their industry in the 90s, they focused on volume to the point that they could have a self-sustaining industry that they could capitalize on, which is where they are now. And now they are heavily invested in quality, so your Netflixes and all of that have quite a number of, there's quite a lot of work that they're doing in Nigeria, but you also have Netflix South Africa, obviously. So our direction was slightly different, where the development, the quality, the script writing, the training, all of that stuff is stuff that has been invested in quite heavily throughout the years. So what we communicate, so we have a slogan, and it's Love South African Film. And it's an instruction, it's not a suggestion, because there is a need and a requirement to be quite bold in what you are saying. I think generally, as I wouldn't say as South Africans, but there are countries in the world that are garishly and boldly bold about being patriotic and being proud. And it's an indoctrination process. So some people might think it's wrong, but it works. So, for example, in the USA, in schools, you sing the national anthem and all of that stuff. You catch them while they're young, you keep them for life. You drive in most neighborhoods in the USA, people have the American flag outside of their house. That's a process of indoctrination. It's not difficult for Americans to buy into brand America, because from the time you're a child, you're told America is the greatest country in the world. And you grow up believing that, even if you don't know any different. So it's not a hard sell. And so the idea with Love South African Film, which we've had as a slogan since 2019, is to make it not a hard sell. That you love South African film. Doesn't matter what you sing from America, that's all wonderful and it's great. But South African film, it's important to love as well. And when I mean South African film, I'm not just talking about South African film that's produced by South Africans. I'm talking about the films that are produced in South Africa. So I'll show you some of them now. There's a slight difference. It's different because you have the production industry, you have the services industry. There are a lot of films that are produced in South Africa, but have a Hollywood packaging, Hollywood positioning, Hollywood distribution. And they're produced in South Africa because of the shift in film, where we've now started the process, in fact not started, been doing the process of making sure that film really is focused on the currency of it. So I'll go more a bit into that as well a bit later, but nonetheless, Love South African Film is an instruction to anyone who is engaging in any of the films that we funded, even if it's films that we haven't funded. There's a South African interaction with that film, which was produced in South Africa. The producer, director, talent, anything related to that are South Africans. You're gonna love South African film. And these are the social media platforms that we and our websites that we communicate a lot of our programs on. And we focus our programs, our communication on social media. We obviously do tap into traditional media, PR, your radios and stuff like that, but we focus on interviews. Yesterday, for those of you who were here, I was saying that our budget may seem big, but if you actually scale it down to the nitty-gritty of it, the marketing budget is neither here nor there. So you have to really depend on what you have and make it work strategically for the audience you wanted to work it for. So these are just some of the South African funded films. Utsotsi, which you guys would know, won the Oscar many years ago, Five Fingers for Marseille. So there's just quite a number of films in By the Wound that we funded. And then there's some film festivals as well. So essentially the distribution platforms for those films, the Joburg Film Festival, Durban International Film Festival, Mpumalanga International Film Festival, and the Limpopo Next Gen Film Festival. So we fund across the country. And some of these are really pillar and hallmark festivals in this country, which the entire industry depends on and galvanizes around. So just in terms of the industry, so overall the industry is currently valued on a number of benefits. Some of them are tangible, some of them are intangible. So obviously it's the development of local content, there's skills development, there's the marketing and tourism impact, there's the social cohesion and all of the positivity about South Africa that you can also communicate through film. And the main areas of business when it comes to the content value chain, there's the content element, there's the services business. But for content, which is where we find your pre-production, production, post, and distribution, marketing and distribution. So a lot of it is centered around production. It's a numbers game. Production, bigger, cost more, cost more, right? So in terms of scale, that's where the scale is. It's in production. It cascades down. So it starts quite smaller when you're in development, script development. It's script, right? You can be at home developing the script. Production, you're on set. Takes longer. That's the nuts and bolts of it. And then post-production, again, it's in the studio. And then marketing and distribution focuses basically on where are these films going to be seen. Is it a festival? Is it Ster-Pinnacle? And then the genres, so you have docus, feature films, TV series, animation series, short films. So in South Africa, you'll see that your short films are kind of dominate, followed by documentaries. Short films are shorter, cheaper to make, so your opportunity in terms of volume is a lot greater. A lot more people with fewer experience can get their feet wet in the industry by doing short films. If you look at an SABC, they create a lot of space, distribution space, slates for short films. MultiChoice started creating space for short films. Zanzibar Films never had that before, right? So many years ago, there was a character, famous character in South Africa, who said that you should have 90% local content. Everyone thought he was crazy. Mnet did it, and they changed their business to reflect that. Before, MultiChoice had Mnet was it, Carte Blanche and the 8 p.m. movie, that was it for the business. Then someone said 90% local. And in the media, it was a bad idea, but the numbers don't lie. Now you have Mzansi Magic, you have Mzansi Wetu, you have Moja Love, which is the biggest channel on DSTV. Yeah. You have 3 Africa Magic channels, which you never had before, right? So also think local in terms of continental, because South Africa is diasporic. Not only South Africans living in South Africa, you have people from all over the continent, but you still have South Africans that like content from around the continent, right? So local content is big business. It depends on the perception of it, but your biggest distributors have shown that. Okay, so this is just the concentration of it. You'll see here that Gauteng, the Western Cape and KZN dominate. And it's purely because, and film is not unique to this, every industry, people move to these provinces for work because the economies of this country, the economy is centered around these 3 provinces. So in film, it's the same thing. Your studios, 90% of them are in the Western Cape, your big studios, where local and international productions are done. Film commissions, KZN Film Commission, Gauteng Film Commission, NFVF, based in Gauteng, right? So you have there are much more opportunities and areas for you if you're a filmmaker, if you produce content in any certain way, if you work on a film, but your 9 to 5 comes from working on a telenovela, chances are you live in Gauteng, you live in Joburg, or you live in Durban, right? If your 9 to 5 comes from a telenovela. You may work on the Empire, in PE, which is one. The rest of them, it's Johannesburg and it's KZN. So everything is centered around those 3 provinces. Because things are centered around those 3 provinces, then we, in terms of providing equitable growth, we have to be very strategic in how we do that and have focus areas. Obviously, still offer national support, but have focus areas in other provinces as well, and do that quite intentionally. So you'll see something like the Eastern Cape, 8%, and Limpopo at 5%. Of all your underserviced provinces, which is basically the other 6 besides the 3 that I mentioned, Eastern Cape and Limpopo perform very well. And sometimes they perform better than, for example, a Western Cape or KZN, because they've also started to see the value of focusing a lot of production value in that province. So ECD, so you have Eastern Cape, you have ECDC, for example, you have ACPAC and also organizations like that, you have telenovelas that are being shot there, you have reality shows that are being shot there. That creates an opportunity for people not to have to leave the Eastern Cape to go and work. Creates the opportunity for, if there's a new telenovela and everyone, the cast is Xhosa, you don't have people speaking Xhosa who you can hear cannot speak Xhosa, which happens a lot, right? So it's those types of things to structurally change a situation where your industries are not concentrated in certain cities only. And these are just the various agencies where people go and get funding, either to fund their projects or to distribute their projects. So obviously you have the NFBF, you have the DTIC, the IDC, the NEF. I mean, the IDC and the NEF, their funding is structured in a way where you essentially have to pay back at a certain rate. NFBF, it's grant funding. So for productions, we do recoup the grant funding, but it's a grant. So the rates you cannot compare them to IDC. But for film festivals and stuff like that, we don't recoup that funding. Support measures. So you'll basically see all this thing is showing you is that the rate of successful and unsuccessful applicants, right? So the unsuccessful is gray. You'll see 2019, 2020, it shot up, right? Unsuccessful was sitting at, 52, 48%, comes to 2019, 65% people that are unsuccessful. 2020 is 67%. Purely because of the COVID pandemic, just was not, there weren't enough calls that went out, so there wasn't enough money to issue out. So, whatever call did go out, the success rate was quite lower because of the general situation. These are also just some of the challenges that exist. Again, you'll see that they're really no different to other industries. Transformation, competition and all of things like that. The main one, yes, you have funding there, but the main one currently you'll see now with a lot of cinemas closing down, or there was a threat to close them down, is distribution. Because you have traditional cinema outlets that created businesses based on price, right? Not based on the potential of the audience. So if you're going to build a situation where you're assuming that the majority of the population is not interested in film and local content, eventually it's going to become a problem. Especially when you have a pandemic and then you have streamers on the rise happening at the same time. So COVID-19 essentially was a catalyst. Basically, things went downhill in a nutshell. That's what that slide is saying. And just to put it to you in numbers, so the industry is valued at 7.2 billion. So that's the general value. Then it declined to 2.9 billion. So that's a contraction of about 59% or something. So the journey now is to get it back up from that 2.9 and get it back up to that 7.2. That 7.2 billion means you had full-time employment jobs of just over 31,000. So you go from 31,000 to 12,000. That's like, to say that is not damaging is something else, right? And then when the pandemic happens, and there are not enough answers from the Department of Labor on what happens to arts, it just makes the situation even worse. So that's just, this graph shows you basically, like, if you look at it in a format, how sharp that decline is for the industry. 7.1, 2.9, it's quite soul destroying. But COVID-19 was a catalyst in many ways because it really forced the industry to kind of revert back to, or not rather revert back, but think outside the box. And I use that term carefully because, I know it's a cliche, but cliches are cliches for a reason. So value reframing is a concept where you don't look at how things are. So basically, there's a saying that goes, sorry, it's not how things are, but how we see them that impacts our behaviors. So there's one thing to look at something in a certain way. Perception is a completely different way. And you change the value of an industry when you change the perception of the value, right? So you reframe the value. Brian Solis says that social media is about sociology and psychology more than technology. And it really is. I mean, if you can just, if you open X on any day, right, at any part in your morning, and you look at what's trending, you get a sense of where the energy is in the country, right? It doesn't matter that not everyone is on X and not everyone has access to a phone. Relatively speaking, if you were to just do a relative calculation, it's a sense check. It's a good sense check, right, of where the country is. You look at those trends and you get an understanding. I mean, if you were to open it now, I haven't been on Twitter today, but I'm sure something around the elections is trending. I know the president and John Cena is in a meeting this afternoon, so people are being, they're saying whatever they want to say about that, whether they know the outcome or not. All of that stuff, the political climate we are in will show you that. So it's always a good reflection and sense check on where on what the sociology situation is anywhere in the world, to be honest. But value reframing is a concept that is not, again, unique. So for example, in retail, Woolworths and Checkers did a very good job of it. Woolworths had the perception of being very expensive. Woolworths is for rich people. I can't afford anything at Woolworths. And they decided to reframe the value, right, of their brand. So they would create these posters, these like newspaper pamphlet things as you walk into the store. They're obviously also available online, but as you walked into the store as a shopper, you would see, okay, this is how I can eat in for 4 instead of going to a restaurant. You can eat in for 4, family of 4, under 150 rand. It already changes your perception. And you shift from thinking, well, this is expensive to, okay, hold on, the 4 of us can eat dinner tonight for under 150 rand. You've shifted the value. You've reframed the value of Woolworths as a brand. With ShopRite Checkers, very old, very outdated, and they had to launch an app because COVID was happening. They had to think quickly. People were not allowed in the stores every day and they had to think on their feet. But they were not, the brand was not associated with digital, was not associated with innovation. So they had to think differently. So Checkers 6060 then became what reframed the value about the Checkers brand when they launched that shopping app. But other retailers have tried to follow suit. They've still not matched up to what Checkers 6060 has done. Particularly because when they said 60/60, it wasn't about delivery, it wasn't about 60 minutes as a maximum. Their goal was actually to deliver in far less than 60 minutes, if not less than 30. And 60 was the worst case scenario, right? So the whole idea around 60/60 was about managing expectations and not promising too much, so that when your delivery comes in 20 minutes, oh my God, Checkers 60/60 is the most amazing thing. Right? You think it's amazing, but their benchmark is probably 30 minutes. But they call it 60/60. 60, it's a minute, it sounds fast. They call it 60/60 so that you never feel like you're in a situation where they're taking too long and it doesn't work and nothing in this country works and then everyone starts complaining. So that's how they reframe the value of Checkers 60/60. If you look at tourism, Dubai went from literally being a desert to a dream. When you go to Dubai, there's a tall building called the Burj Khalifa. You'll stand there and look inside a magnifying glass. You look to your left, you see where it was 50 years ago. Desert, nothing, sand. You turn it to your right and you see the metropolis it is today. Because they knew they wanted to compete with America, they wanted to compete with Europe, and become the tourism mecca. They wanted flights to interconnect in Dubai, right? To bring as many expats in via metropolis for convenience. You know, you go to Dubai, it's hot as hell. But if you go to the mall, you can experience snow. You go to a mall, you experience snow, you ski in a mall, you leave the mall, it's still hot. Because they want to give you everything. It's a tourism maker. So literally from a desert to a dream. Mauritius, pretty much the same thing. It took Mauritius 60 years. Mauritius also, they didn't have anything. They just had white sand. And they decided, you know, let's kind of beautify this thing and hype it up. And it became the most romantic place to go, even though it's still just white sand. Perception, right? So, like I was saying before, NFVF, you know, didn't just arrive. We've been here for a while, since 1997. And we were enacted just around the time when South Africa won the World Cup for the first time. So there was a lot of euphoria in the country. There was a lot of euphoria. So there's things that we have seen since then and ways that we've also had to adjust to speak to the relevance of society, of the market, of the country. And all of this that we've observed, right, especially as an agency of government, and shifting to our communications to be predominantly on social media. All our calls, everything is on social media. Everything is on social media. Some agencies, you can physically go there and drop your application. We do not do that. Everything is on social media. You go to our NFF website, you apply online. Because at the time, we knew that that would be the future. So you can understand the situation of where people are, or you can choose to actually bring people to where the future is and where you know it's going to be sooner than later. They can complain, they can kick, they can moan. Eventually, the world will force you to be in a place like the pandemic did, where you're going to have to be connected digitally, either way. So it's never too late, especially as government agencies, as government departments. It's never too late and you're never too old to figure this stuff out. And I'm saying that in the context of a lot of the conversations that I've had around, you know, the leadership, the seniors and government agencies and departments who kind of feel that social media is for younger people, and it's not necessarily that. It's a tool for everybody. These are the longest running TV shows of all time, right? So in the USA, Saturday Night Live, The Young and the Restless, Sesame Street. Saturday Night Live has 7.5 million Instagram followers. If it is the longest running show of all time, does it need Instagram followers? Doesn't need Instagram, does it not? Or does it have an audience that is so connected to it that would watch it just by default? Absolutely it does. But the people that started watching Saturday Night Live when it started, some of them have died because they're old. So how do you sustain the brand? You bring it to now, right? You create the social media platforms when it's not the popular thing to do. Sesame Street, viral videos on Sesame Street on TikTok. So you can have a grandmother and a grandchild living in the same house, both being raised on Sesame Street, right? So the Tonight Show, the Tonight Show again. So the Tonight Show as well is one of the longest running shows, but again, trying to keep it relevant with the times, including artists like BTS. BTS have a huge social media following. So I think in the beginning, all of these things seem very scary until they're not, until you're actually doing them. And they're not quite scary. I think one of the challenges, particularly in government, is that there's a lot of ageism, right? And I have to say that. So there's sexism, definitely. There's serious ageism. And I think the ageism is worse than the sexism. So when you're young, when you're black, when you're a female, it's problematic. Because what do you know? You're not a comrade. You weren't there with us in the gutters. You never came from exile. Right? The point of the matter is that part of the reason why there may be no or a little or not big enough in energy towards embracing social media. Part of the reason is that you do not have enough decision makers in the room who are actually on social media. That's problem number one. Secondly, they're not senior enough. So too many cascading titles for you to get a message to the people who can make a difference. Too many levels. So no one's going to listen to, that person who just arrived and is too young and is too this and is too what, and do you know what I mean? It doesn't sound like they know struggle. Yeah. They don't sound like it. So what do they know? What can they benefit? How can they, because at the end of the day, you can write a press release all you want and you can really make it the most professional and professionalize it and make it absolutely wonderful. The reality is there are people who are not going to read it. So you can tell yourself we've done all the work as communicators, but no one's going to know. Because people are inundated with so much communication on their phones. In an hour, forget a day, in an hour. Doesn't mean press statements don't have value. They absolutely do. You have to balance traditional platforms, traditional channels with new. You have to balance the two. But you must balance the two. You mustn't just balance the one. So you're never too old and it's never too late to learn and to unlearn. That's a practical example. We've just had the elections. Now, from 1994, for as far as I can remember, when you see election posters, everyone talks about jobs. Jobs, 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 jobs. New parties, older parties, everyone's talking about jobs, right? They shall remain nameless, but everyone's talking about jobs. But if you think of where this country's gone from 1994, there are things that have happened that live beyond jobs, right? So there's not enough of high-level communication. Everything focuses on the mass market only. The mass market, the older generation will vote in a particular way anyway. Yeah. Dare I say, you almost don't even need to spend that much energy. They will do it. It's the younger generations that are easily pliable to vote in a different direction because they pulled and stretched by famous terms. They see Barack Obama in America, a completely different country, saying change, change, change. Oh, vote for change. And then South African politicians, some of them pick up those words and they go, oh, Obama was inspirational. Oh, maybe this person is a pseudo-Obama. This is South Africa. It's not the same thing. So you easily get confused by quick terms that can catch you instead of understanding the context of the country you live in. So, for example, there's a department called the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. They basically engineered the SMME Center. There are businesses in South Africa that at some point were small businesses, then became medium scale, now are large scale businesses because of the DTIC. But when you talk about the DTIC, for example, in the film sector, there's a negative connotation because of issues with the rebate, right? But there's an entire sector of business that was essentially built by that department. There's been an establishment of the Economic Development Department and the Small Business Department. These things never existed. Entire departments engineered to assist small businesses. There are faces, there are lives of successful Black people who are CEOs of banks and multinationals. You'll see their faces on the cover of Destiny, and that's it, right? There will not be communication and extrapolation of that journey and how they're there. You know, my dad recently had I was telling someone yesterday, he had an operation in a Pretoria hospital, a private hospital. There were 30 medical professionals in that room. Nurses, doctors, nurses assistants, doctors assistants. Every single one of those people was Black. All of them. If I worked for the ANC, That would be my communication tool, to say that's the work of the ANC. Because none of those people would be medical professionals without them. Without economic empowerment, without opening, without making sure that you have medical institutions like Medunsa, it would not be possible. I wouldn't be creating posters. I mean, what? Why? You know, in 2024, a poster that says jobs? Really? Yes, if you're a political party that started yesterday. If you've been since 1994. Really? So there's a different way, ultimately, to reframe the value of what you offer and what you've done. Because everything may not be great. There's no country in the world where everything is functioning 100%. That is just a reality. But you have to contextualize the stuff that's been done that people may not know. You know, people may unconsciously be ungrateful for certain things only because they don't know, and it's never actually been communicated. So it's not just about communicating what government is doing now. You know, we're fixing lights, we're fixing water. You kind of have to have a retrospective look, and you communicate consistently, and you do not wait for elections because it's too late. Indoctrination, you start, you build the case, you remind people, you educate people about things that they don't know, that they benefit from. So in terms of film, film has started the journey of reframing its value from culture to currency by focusing on making South Africa the production destination of choice. So instead of just saying South African films are great, our stories are untold, and that stuff is good, it's important, absolutely. But it's about having a conversation around film at an area of national importance. So in terms of film, so how we show up at international film festivals is this is the conversation we have. We talk about South Africa, yes, we're a film agency, but we talk about the country as a production destination of choice. So you're already talking about the tourism aspect there. So you have favorable locations. You can decide to shoot in the Western Cape or the Eastern Cape or KZN, anywhere along the coast. You have the beach, you have high-rise buildings, you have everything in one spot. Your weather, right? Your weather is relatively predictable. You know, our winter months are winter months, our summer months, our summer months. It's not something unpredictable. Your crews, you have very diverse crews. People that are also very experienced, and a very, very favorable exchange rate, which makes it far cheaper. Thank you so much. Which makes it far cheaper for you to shoot a production or even do post-production in South Africa and Cape Town than it is to shoot it in LA. So for example, these are some films of the many films that you may have watched, as the chemical and all of that have actually been shot in South Africa. Some are films, some are series. The Woman King, as a lady a black female, her services company did services for the Woman King, black South African female. You have Mad Max, you have Roots on the History Channel, Resident Evil, Safe House. This is just some of them. There's a laundry list of them. So, also in film, I think what became an opportunity was to reframe it in the context of how film is a solution for the job situation that we have, right? For the high unemployment rate that we have. Film is a solution. You can employ a lot of people on a film set. A lot of people on a film set. Not everyone needs a degree. Not everyone needs a master's. Not everyone needs an honors, right? People can come literally read. You do not even need to have a matric certificate to find yourself on a film set. You don't. If you get a really junior level role, you could be running around, you can find yourself on a film set employed, right? So your youth unemployment, and I mean that really carefully because obviously the education aspect around film and the development, like I said before, is absolutely fundamental and critical, which is why we fund bursaries and do a lot of training programs. But a lot of the training is also on-the-job training. It's very different to read about productions and films and just watch them and read about them in a textbook. Completely different situation when you're on set. So the job creation mandate of film, right? Looking at film as a vehicle to solve then became a calling card. So that the presidency had a program called the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program. They gave money to many institutions, including the National Film and Video Foundation. So it's a program that we've been doing since 2020, where we basically get something similar to our budget, but we allocate that money purely to filmmakers so that they can create jobs, right? So you apply for funding, you either want to do a film, you want to do a training program, you want to do a film festival. In your application, you need to prove to us that you can create at least 10 jobs or more. Because as an entity, for each installation of PSP, we will have then a job creation target to have, to achieve. So for example, just in a nutshell, these are all the PSPs that we've done. PSP 1, 3, 4, 5. And all the streams. So we funded producers, we funded people who want to train people, we funded people who want to host film festivals and screenings. We had business recovery, but it fell away. So we focused on the 3 streams, right? And then we started doing an internship program where we recruit 120 interns. For PSP5 this year, we're recruiting 140. 120 interns to digitize films and immortalize films. So we do that with the National Archives. So in all, we then have a job target. So we started from 8,000 in PSP1. We just did just over that 8,101. Then our budget was increased quite significantly, and we did quite a number of things differently. And then we went from a target of 9,000 to over 20,000. PSP4, which we're still doing, it ends in October. We had a target of 11,000. We've just exceeded it to just over 12,000. And then PSP5, which we're still doing, we do PSP4 and 5 simultaneously. We have a target of 9,500. Unfortunately, the budget went down. So it was going up very nicely, and then it went to 179.3, and then it dropped to 163 million. Our budget as an entity also dropped this year. So, but this, unfortunately, is exemplary of a big challenge around budget, where you have an industry that shows huge potential, and you have entities whose budgets should be growing comparatively. So you have a situation where the budgets then increase at an increasing rate, then they start increasing at a decreasing rate, and then they start decreasing. And unfortunately, arts and culture falls, they're susceptible to that, right? Unlike other departments, it's a whole other issue. But the crux of the matter is, through PSP, it becomes a great example to just consistently prove the point of the job creation potential of this industry, and particularly because the jobs are at the center of it. So Matt Gula says that social media is about the people, not about your business. So provide for the people, and the people will provide for you. It takes us 7 months to go from releasing a call to people actually getting their funding. 7 months with PSP, right? But how we start determines how we finish off. So to get these numbers that I'm talking about here, particularly this one, this 20,000, right? You need to start strong. And everything we do starts with the calls that we release on our social media platforms. Everything. So I think Instagram, we have 20,000 followers. Facebook is 32,000. We're like millions. We don't have to get to do numbers. We're not there yet. But relatively small number. Social media is not about having millions and thousands of followers. It's about your engagement and the rate at which you grow. Because we've got into 20,000 quite quickly. So it's what you're engaging on, how you're engaging on, how frequently you're engaging on. The engagement numbers are absolutely everything. So we start publishing the calls for the roadshows, for to apply for everything through our social media platforms. And that takes us all the way through a process where people apply, things are reviewed, people are, appointed, they get their contracts and all of that. 7-month process. If we fail at the beginning, it affects how many people can be funded. Because if we do not communicate that effectively, if we don't pair it up with things that make sense, then the message is lost. And when I mean pair it up with things that make sense, I'm talking about balancing. So we do social media posts, absolutely. We measure how we are interacting and what the perception of the NFF brand is on social media. We do all of those things. We track as much as we possibly can, but we pair it up with traditional media, right? Because we live in South Africa, and we cannot take for granted that data issues are not a real thing. They definitely are. But we're also speaking to filmmakers. And we know that because the opportunities are few and far in between, filmmakers will collectivize, they'll galvanize together, and they will go to the sources of funding that are there, right? If you want to become a CA, you have many options. You can apply to KPMG, to PwC, to SMG, to all of these fancy accounting firms, right? You can apply even not to an accounting firm. You can apply to Unilever, you can apply to Colgate-Palmolive, Coca-Cola, and get yourself a bursary to study accounting because you're studying accounting. The country deems it necessary to have as many CAs and doctors, lawyers, and all of those things. You want to study film, then it is. You don't have the luxury of going everywhere, right? So that targeting is a real thing, but you still need to ventilate on traditional platforms. And we don't focus on metro FMs, and we focus on community radio stations because, again, the engagement levels on community radio stations are insane.
Yeah.
The listenerships are insane.
Yeah.
People actually listen, they engage, they know the people that are the radio hosts. It's a real community. And you can listen to one interview about a roadshow and tell other people about it. And it's just because of the one interview you had on whatever type of community radio station that you had, even the TV interviews that we do. It's strategic, it's targeted things. Yes, we would, at some point, we would just take up any interview. But it actually doesn't make sense. It's not a strategic post. Someone was talking about doing everything everywhere or being targeted in your approach. It's so fundamentally important, especially when you don't have a lot of money to go around. This PSP call that I'm telling you about, for some of you who were here last year, we usually get people who ask collectively all of the applications, they ask to the value of 5 billion rand. On average, they ask for 5 billion as a collective when we have 150 million. It's like you're already playing, and that's through communicating on social media and doing roadshows. And you get applications to the value of 5 billion rand when you're only dealing with 150 million. So your roadshows then are the ones that we publish, and the roadshows then that we have, which are packed to capacity, filled with what? Filmmakers. Not people who think, oh yeah, here's government, let's go and let's get a food pack. Guys, let me tell you something. We find a free t-shirt. And sometimes it becomes a to and fro with the local government in some of the provinces because they want us to partner with them so that they can bus people to the roadshows. Problem. Besides the fact that I don't have money to feed 300 people, that's beside the point. You do not want to go to an underserviced province like Kimberley, where you have actual filmmakers, right, who have very little resources, to fill out a huge community hall and talk to people who actually have bread and butter issues. And then the 2, 3, 4 filmmakers that are there don't get to ask their questions, right? So when one of the panelists was talking about market intelligence, and someone was talking about the lack of coordination, to deal with the coordination, it becomes such a cumbersome process. that it's something we have to streamline, and we make sure we streamline for our own shows, right? So in an ideal world, we would always do it in a community hall. I say means it does not work. Because to sit in a community hall and talk to 100 people, one of which is a filmmaker, the rest of which just want you to finish so that they can get a food pack, it's not fair. It's not fair on them, and it's not fair on us, and it's not fair on the filmmakers. So these are some of the things that we have to navigate around. Don Schultz says that social media creates communities, not markets, right? So look at this community that we created in terms of the increase in the applications that we've gotten. Basically, PS before we got 1,055. Again, with our roadshows and our comms, our digital media comms, we streamlined things even more. We've got 1,163, right? The important thing here is that, yes, your Gauteng, your KZN, and your Gauteng and your KZN declined, but they'll recover. Gauteng will still get the most number of applications. They've had more practice at the start, so the applications tend to be more qualitative and compliant. But your underserviced provinces have all increased in terms of the number of people applying. All of them have increased. Eastern Cape went from 120 to 130. Free State, 51 to 81. Northern Cape doubled, 24 to 48. Northwest, 41 to 62. Limpopo, 119 to 136. Mpumalanga, 73 to 105. That's what we're looking for. When we start our social media campaign, this is what we want. Because that's how you know you're mandate-centric. That's how you know you're creating equitable growth. Because more people from the provinces that need it the most are responding more favorably to the call. So just numerically, for example, you'll see in PS3, Northwest and Northern Cape, we couldn't give any grants there, right? But if you look at the difference with PS4, at least the numbers started to pick up. And you'll think to yourself, oh, Northwest only 1, Northern Cape only 3. It's symptomatic of an issue we've had for a long time, because over the past 5 years, like I was saying about stats report, look at all of your underserved provinces, these ones in particular, your primary ones. So if you look at Northern Cape, right, 12 grants, and a total of 2,044 grants, 12 have gone to Northern Cape, right? So, and these things are exacerbated by other situations, structural issues in the actual province. So how we sell the SAFTAs, for example, yes, we sell it, again, balancing act. We use the audience size of the two channels we broadcast on, Mzansi Magic and SABC3. Numbers, millions, right? That's what advertisers, potential sponsors want to see. They want to see those big numbers. So that's how we sell it. But this is how we value it, right? SAFTAs, the AVE for SAFTA 17 was 121.6 million. For SAFTA 16, it was 802,000. So SAFTA 16 was a virtual show, and we went back to an in-person show last year for SAFTA 17. In person, people, red carpet, take a picture of me. I want to post on Instagram, the hashtag, all of that stuff, all that social media engagement. We went from 802,000 to 121.6 million. And the predominance came from where social media, AVE of 66.3 million. So you cannot ignore the impact, you cannot ignore the numbers, it's there, and that's why we leverage and we used it. So film has always been associated with liberation. You have Sarafina, which recently celebrated 30 years last year. You also have the famous film Abanzula. So it's really always been a central part of the South African identity, and it will continue to be, right? It will continue to be to the extent that we don't see ourselves as separate from the rest of the continent. And indeed, we must remember that the revolution will not be televised. Social media is the ultimate equalizer. It gives a voice and a platform to anyone willing to engage. So I hope that I have engaged you sufficiently today. I don't know if there are any questions. I must navigate it.
Yeah, I hope you're inspired.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? Dr. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's quite a lot that you had to cover there, but I'm just going to ask a question that goes back to a comment that you made around filmmaking being a social science subject matter, as opposed, to mainstreaming it to technology. Now, my first question around that is, you presented statistics around the jobs that you guys have created and the internships. And most probably my assumption is that you have a relationship with MIC CETA. Firstly, to what extent do you get pressure from MIC CETA to start looking at new ways of doing films and getting into the digital space? And then secondly, do you guys do a statistical analysis where you look at the gender dimensions of those whom you provide internships to? Like, for example, we know that predominantly, like how we are seeing in this room, people who are behind the cameras, the camera crew tend to be mostly male. Creators and directors tend to be male dominated. And obviously the way in which certain films are going to be, written with a form of representation will obviously have an element of biasness. So do you have any deliberative projects or programs that take the gendered dimension into consideration? And then lastly, within this whole concept of MIC CETA, to what extent do you see the youth seeing value on the sustainability of these internships that are coming from CETAs, because they tend to be short term? So yeah, let me just stop there.
Thank you. So I think with the CETA, I always do it with the CETA. We have had an internship program for the longest time where we employ through them, obviously through their assistants, interns in production companies, big ones, your urban breweries across the country. And in terms of the challenge that you spoke to, I would think not as yet. It is something that is run by HR, but I do not think so, because it's a program that is rolled over, right, year on year. We focused on making the circle bigger and making sure more interns have access to it. Luckily, because they do essentially fund half of the stipend, it allows us to do it, right? But in terms of the challenge, I would say it's neither here nor there, because I don't have the fact in front of me, right? I'm gonna have to ask HR about it. But in terms of the programs we have that are, first of all, in terms of the studies. So we've done gender matter studies on the industry as a whole, right? Where we've looked from your junior level, so from your internships up to people that are more experienced. We've looked at the construction of the gender breakdown in the industry, in terms of everything, in terms of the pay gaps and all of that stuff. So we do have a gender matter study that we've done with GIZ. We've also got our transformation report that we did in 2022. So we due to do it next year again. That transformation report also touches on. We don't have a report that speaks to the internship program specifically, but we've included it in the overarching reports that we've done on gender matters in the industry and also transformation in the industry. If I think of our economic impact assessment report as well, there's something that speaks to that in there as well, right? And then in terms of the other programming specific things we have a number of, so the idea generally, right, even though the practicalities of implementing it, it's something that I said before is, catching them while they're young and keeping them for life. So one of my colleagues, Nadine Tutter, she's our non-fiction manager. She started out as an NFA bursar, right? And she went through the bursary program, and she herself was a filmmaker. She, won a SAFTA. Someone who's quite celebrated in the industry, who works at the NFA, started through the process and was one of kind of those success stories. But I would be lying if I would say that in terms of that tracking, which is something that we need, that tracking from internship to wherever they are now, there isn't a study that exists like that, right? And it's definitely something that we've been trying to look into for a while now. The other programs that we have, though, we have a youth filmmaker slate, right? So our youth filmmaker slate, it's structured in a similar way to our female filmmaker slate, where but we find people youth that are quite green and need to understand the process from ideation to completing the film. And they have 12 months to create a short film. And they're mentored by a tier 2 production company, right? So, a production company headed by someone who themselves is marginalized in some way, but has the experience and can relate with a lot of the interns. So that youth filmmaker program, it happens so that production company will facilitate the process for us every 3 years. So there'll be a new cohort. So after 3 years, then it's 30 people, it's 30 filmmakers that we've taken through that process. And that one is particularly for youth. And then we have quite a lot of other training programs. We have Sadiba programs. So in terms of the skills development training, it's quite diverse. Obviously, within the budget constraints that we have, we used to give about 76 bursaries annually. Now we give 26. Because again, like I was saying to you, it's budgets increasing at a decreasing rate and then decreasing. And unfortunately, in the long term, who is affected are the people that should be coming in through the pipeline. The people who we should be pumping money into the most. Difference between 76 and 26 is life changing. So I think it's a very good point that you raised, because I guess there's a lot more work to be done in terms of tabulating that a bit more and maybe doing a study to zone in on that. But in terms of the youth programs that we have, they're quite diverse. Did I answer everything?
Yeah.
And then Lady, the last question.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to ask with regards to the SP, when you choose the films and you do your roadshows, are there specific storylines or films that you choose and you let people? Do you have a criteria or a genre that people know that only these certain films are going to be funded, only these internships are going to get?
Yeah, but we stick to format, so fiction, non-fiction. And then it's up to filmmakers. Because then eventually what ends up happening is you start running a propaganda campaign. And you start being too dictatorial. Yes, it's happened. In other countries, yeah.
My question is also.
So it's just fiction, non-fiction. It can be a documentary, feature film. It's up to you. Animation. It's up to you what the story is.
And then do you feel that people maybe in the more, if you're going into the other provinces, more rural provinces, then your Gauteng and KZNs, where the film industry is quite big, does that impact on the quality of the applications that you get?
Yes and no. I'll give you an example. In Kovo, I'm a service province, right? They could see that no one was coming to help them. They had a film commission in 2016, and then the film commission closed. And then, so they don't have one, right? But they get funded more than the Western Cape, particularly for festivals. Their numbers are high, right? They perform like a service province because they help themselves as a community. They will go to someone's house, they'll go to a community center, they'll do whatever, right? They'll collectively work together. Whoever knows how to apply, it's not copying applications. I'm stuck. What does this thing mean when they mean? And sometimes it's people who've been rejected before. They said my treatment wasn't clear enough. Can you have a look at it and can you see how I can fix the treatment? My budget, it looks like it's not coming. They literally assist one another, and the numbers show. So it depends. What's the other provinces? For example, okay, I don't want to name the province, but there are two particular provinces, right? They're not the best performing, but the challenges there is that it's a mind frame issue. So they could be doing what Limpopo is doing, but they don't want to do it because they don't want. First of all, they have a misconception around how much people get funded, right? So we publish all of the amounts that people get. People see those figures and they say, why is he getting this much and why is he always the one getting funded? And they don't want to learn. And it's the same people who get funded from those provinces that are willing to help other people. They don't want to take the learning from those people. Because they don't want to work with, they don't want them on their set, they don't want to pay them. It's a thing of there's not enough in the pie, right? Whereas in Limpopo, the perception is completely different. Where there's everyone enough, there's enough for everyone under the sun. So it's a perception thing. So the quality of the work is not determinant on where the application is from.
Thank you.
Yes. Another. All right, and then we are getting into our last presentation. To me, really must come in with the things.
You can use the old one. You can use the old one, it's fine. I'll just skip through those ones.
It's not on the computer.
Ladies and gents, while we're just sorting out our technical difficulties, please do stretch because I've got the worst slot ever because everyone is ready to go home and now you have to listen to me for the next 30 minutes. But I promise to make it very exciting. Good. So I already see people moving, so I'm just warning you. If anyone wants to stretch out, please. There's only 2 minutes and then we can do it. Do it. I need you to energize yourself.
So I'm saying I should be because hey, when I be fighting, I know I might cry. Hey, I haven't cried in a minute, but it's
Exactly. So social media is people are not using this. Exactly. You just have to show that that thing is entirely and it's mostly on your side. Yes. No, we shall talk.
Why did you say you must correct?
It's taking too long. Yes, the sugar will pick, yes. So,
I don't know if that was a good or bad thing to get everyone out. It's okay. Are you good to listen? Sugar high. Good, I'm going to ask you guys all the questions. I'm going to ask this front row all the questions. Watch.
All right, we are back and we are resuming. Yes, I know that the room is not as full as it was earlier when Bumi arrived.
No, I'm happy with this crowd.
Yes,
You're
right.
on a sugar high. I love it.
Give a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Lorata. I think listening and looking at the agenda for the last 2 days, everything that everyone has spoken of, I think I'm just going to summarize into how can we create or take that data and actually create a story of it. Because I was saying to Lorata earlier on, or last week when we spoke, for the past 7 years I've been at Meltwater. We've got a massive customer base, and most of our clients have been private, right? Or your Fortune 500 companies. But a lot of people have been steering away from government entities because it is very hard to filter into the government space, especially on a marketing department, and trying to get them to understand the importance of data. And I remember 7 years ago, I stepped in and I was like, right, I'll take on this challenge. It's been a very challenging 7 years. And I think when COVID hit, things changed drastically because now all of a sudden you were forced to convert over to a more digital focus. And I must say, it's not everyone that's really taken on the online or social space. It's still a challenge. It's still something educational that we are teaching. But I hope after today, there's more light shown in terms into social listening and also the importance of social listening. And it's data that's there. It's so easy to utilize it. And you can use companies like ourselves to disseminate and understand exactly what those data means. So topic of my talk today is social listening for government, and specifically focused on government. We provide services for different companies, right? From your Fortune 500 to your smallest NGO, and all of them have a different need. So we're going to talk a little bit about the 4 main needs that we've seen in South Africa based on the government entities that we work with, and use some of those use cases and maybe something that resonates and relates to your specific division. So just a quick overview of myself. I'm the growth director for Meltwater Africa. Like I said, I've been in the company for the past 7 years. Love everything marketing, digital, or rather marketing, PR, and of course AI. And Meltwater just assisted me to bring all 3 worlds into one. Excuse me. So in a nutshell, this is just Meltwater overview. 27,000 clients, 2,300 employees, 50 offices across 6 continents. And we were founded in 2001, but in South Africa specifically, we started operating in 2008. I was in grade 11. So 2008 is when we set foot in South Africa. Again, just to summarize some of our clients, I think for myself being in this space, it's really just allowed me to adjust the way I approach different industries. And it's helped me also speak into different government entities, how to approach what their needs or what their crises or potential needs could be from our services. So to make sure we stick to agenda, because I was told 20 minutes, I've just given a quick rundown. And what I want to do before we start talking about social listening use cases for government entities is I want to give you an overview of the current social media landscape in South Africa. Now, there's different companies that provide those. Funny enough, on my way here on 702, one of our other competitors also issued a social media landscape. We issue ours usually in the beginning of the year with partnership with We Are Social, we conducted a report specifically for South Africa, but as well as global as a whole. There's some interesting stats that's going to shock a lot of people. So let's jump straight into social media stats. So first of all, this barcode here, if you scan it, you can actually download the full 300-page report. And there's a section that's specifically dedicated to South Africa or Africa as a whole as well. So I'll give it 5 seconds and then I'll move over. So now this for me was quite interesting, right? So population of over 60 million, but we've got over 118 devices, or 118 million mobile devices. So we all know that 1 or 2 person that's got 2 or 3 phones, right? We were able to report back on that. 45 million internet users in South Africa, respectively, with 26 million identities on social media. Yes, it also combines people with multiple Instagram accounts, as an example. But in South Africa, if you had to communicate right now and have a generic outspread, you're speaking to 26 million social media identities. With that being said, 98% of them uses their mobile phone to gain access to the internet. And then the other 93 as well uses their laptop or desktop. So if you ever were thinking of distributing content or conversation, something that's fitted for specifically a phone, perfect fit, because 98% of the internet users will have access to that information. 97% uses social media. And I want to show you something quite interesting about that. South Africa became the number 1 most internet users globally. Number 1. Someone earlier spoke about the data issue. Absolutely understand. But we're still the number 1 internet users in the world. So on average, South Africa, on average, but internet users, right? We spend about 9 hours, 24 minutes. Globally, average 6 hours, 40. So we're almost 3 hours more than the global average. With that being said, we're number 2 in terms of social media usage. Guys, South Africans spend over 3 hours on social media. I don't know about you, but I have a 9 to 5, right? Anything before and after, I do not want to touch my phone. Well, I also work in this space, so I have social media constantly bombarded for those 9 hours. I do not have time. So where do you find 3 hours and 40 minutes to spend time on social media? But this was quite interesting, and I went to Kenya last month, and I remember presenting this to them. And their biggest mobile or network provider, Safaricom, couldn't believe that. So one of the things that correlated with them was they moved over to new packages. So Safaricom is connected to the Vodacom. So they're the Vodacom of Kenya. And one of the main differences or changes that they made is they made data cheaper, right? And we actually showed them this report from 2022 versus now. And because of that data change, we believe due to the data cost being lower, it also increased their average social media spend time per user. So this is quite interesting. If you ever want to talk to your audiences, because I think one of the things that I always say to government entities, yes, you're a public enterprise, right, or entity, but you're still a brand. You still have to communicate to your audiences on social media. They spend 3 hours, 40 minutes on social media. What a better way and easy way for you to go and communicate with them. The insights are there, and I think when it comes to government entities, we're just not using the knowledge, or rather the information, to your benefit. We don't have to struggle. I always say work smarter, not harder, and with insights like these, it should be easier for you to communicate to your people. So again, you are a brand, right? This is a little bit different because on a B2C level, this would work perfectly, but as yourself, as a brand, I think we came in, second. 64% of those social media users seek influencers online, or seek brands rather, on social media. So again, if someone wants to find out what's happening to Home Affairs in Polokwane, I'm going to use my social stats or my social channels to understand exactly what's been happening with the unit. Again, these are just all statistics about based on South Africans. How you use it internally as a government department is up to you. But also, 46% of social media users use social media as a source of news. Now, we all know that government entities are prone to crisis or misinformation, right? And 46% of the information that our users find or react to comes from social media. So it's powerful, but also yet dangerous at the same time. And it's up to you as a brand to have a listening capability, something online or available for you to listen in on all those social conversations, to understand exactly how you are being perceived, what's been said about the brand, in order for you to proactively react. And this was quite interesting because we've seen the increase of social influences in South Africa over the last 5 years drastically increase. But the beauty about this is we're no longer going after the celebrities, we're going after nano and micro influencers. So people that I can relate to, right? We're talking about an event happening in, and I keep referring to the one because I'm from the purpose. And earlier on, I was speaking to one of my colleagues. But constantly, or rather, if I had an event, let's say it's World AIDS Day, and I'm using an influencer to promote the event or to speak about it or communicate about it to a younger audience, it's a perfect platform in South Africa to actually use it. Because 34% of our people actually listen and rely on them to actually give advice on what works and what doesn't. Sorry, I don't know if someone's asking a question or. So that was just an overview of the social media landscape. Like I said, the report has a 300-pager where you can run through everything. It goes into deeper stats. I think there's some interesting stats in terms of the perfect time of the day that these social media also uses time. And that's also some of the information that we disseminate is giving you an understanding of when to post. Gone are those days where we spray and pray. In PR, we used to say we spray and pray. That is gone. Understanding exactly what time and when to put out your conversation and your content online is so crucial in order for you to get engagement. And I'm not going to talk about this, I'm not going to name the specific department, but they came to us and saying, listen, putting out this conversation, but we're not getting as much engagement. And all we did was we plugged in their data and their conversational engagement online, and we realized that they were just automatically posting 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what, and based on our data, we saw that listen during lunchtime is when people actually want to talk to you. That's when most of your audiences are online. So at 8 o'clock, where you have 10,000 versus 12 o'clock, where you have 500,000, why would you keep on doing an 8 o'clock stuff? So that's just a few of the tips and tricks that understanding where and when to post based on the social information. So I wanted to touch on these 4 topics because these are 4 use cases that we use for specifically for government, and I'm going to use some of our government clients as an example of how we've been supporting them. Right? So from brand management, crisis management, which is no stranger for most of you, and working in government space, misinformation, very big topics in government specifically, and trend detection. So for effective crisis management, we live in a world where we are a digital community, right? And I think as a government, and I keep referring as government entities because I believe most of the people in the room are from a government entity, you are most friendly to that as well. It has grown over the last years, and COVID has forced everyone to be a big or play bigger on a digital scapes. And there's a holistic overview of content and conversation. And one of the things when it comes to crisis that we've seen is, on a public scale, 1 out of 5 companies, or rather companies experience crisis 1 in 5 years. And I think for government entity and us, the ones that I do work with, I think it's a habit. Every 3rd month, there's something happening, there's information, someone said this, And we have stepped in and allowed clients to be more proactive because there's a lot of data out there, right? And we don't want you to go manually go pull out all the information. We're actually capsulating everything into one and saying, listen, did you see what happened in Victoria? This person at Home Affairs did this. You guys might want to get involved. For IEC, we were actually, during the election, we actually helped them with disseminating all the content because there was a lot of conversation happening. One of the things that we've seen differently for the last election and now is the amount or the volume of content, public conversation. Now this is then increased by over 50%. And people are vocal, right? And I know we spoke about X. X is not one of my favorite places, but that's where people go and complain and talk about their issues, right? And for the IEC, X was their number one platform where they could see people commenting, and complaining, for lack of a better word. Funny enough, there was one influencer who made a TikTok video of all the issues that took place in a specific region in Gauteng. It went viral. It was brilliant. So and I don't know how they did, but they basically it was three voting sessions. Went to the 3 different voting stations and took videos of all the issues that took place and made a whole video on it. I think it was brilliant, right? So we look at all the information and plans and all of that immediately just picks it. An example of a client that we helped with for crisis management was SNDF. Absolutely love the brand, and I think the reason I love SNDF is there's so much potential, but it's just the sentiment online or on social, and that's one of the things they didn't expect people to have is having such a big social presence. It's such a negative environment, for lack of a better word, and it's unfortunate because it's more people related, right? So the organization can put out their press releases and this is what we're doing and promote all the wonderful things. And earlier I spoke to someone about it. You are a brand, and what you do, people knowing where you work, will come out. And specifically for the SNDF, it was a potential crisis that happened in Limpopo, the border, and videos went viral. I'm sure all of you saw it on Cardwatch as well. Funny enough, before it went live on Cardwatch, a few days before that, we picked it up. And that's how we were able to say, listen, heads up, this is what's happening. And obviously they knew about it because Cardwatch obviously reached out to them. So these are just some of the things we alert you and say, listen, did you know that these soldiers or whoever were picked up doing this, bribery, all the incidents. So our system alerts them immediately of anything that spikes. So that's the beauty of social conversation. As soon as something turns into the abnormal, for lack of a better word, our system picks it up and sends it over as a crisis alert. And we send it over to everyone on that license for you to understand, do we need to act or is this something that's going to die down? One of the other things that we can also do is use image recognition. So social listening has been known to be based on text. So if you say Department of Health did this, you pick up Department of Health and we notify you of what's been said about the entity. We now use image recognition. So if someone takes a picture of Coca-Cola, good time, right? Didn't mention Coca-Cola, good time. We pick up the logo and we notify the client, listen, good sentiment, this is what someone posted about you. Take a picture at Department of Health, again referring to that in the background, we can actually pick up and say, oh, this individual was here, complained about service. So it doesn't even mention Department of Health, but the fact that you had Department of Health in the background, we pick that up and we send it immediately to our clients. So we're now moving into a space where AI is really playing a big part, where we now also just using image recognition to identify potential processes as well. So from a brand management thing, and I think I can't talk enough about it because it's a message that I've been trying to instill in government entities is you are a brand. A perfect example, even though this is a private entity, there was an incident with 2 people in Cape Town where road rage, guy called, because there was a Palestine sticker behind the one car. It became very ugly. Anyways, they took a picture of the number plate of the individual. And what does Twitter do? Of course, it goes and finds this individual. This individual is a top exec, and it was Investec? Sorry, it was Investec. Because I remember the thing also coming to us about the crisis. It was Investec, top executive at Investec, and I think if you think about it, it was on a Saturday, personal capacity, did nothing for the brand. But everyone connected it back to Investec. All of a sudden, everyone, Investec, did you see what your employees have done, or what your employee has done? It's racial, etc., etc. And that's the same for government entities. And I guess there's a bigger problem and a bigger sort of way of solving this. But if I have a bad experience at Department of Health, of course my perception of the entity is going to be negative because of an individual, right? And all of that conversation can lead up back into online and social media. If I'm a social individual, I'm going to go online, Department of Health, I hate your services. However, the conversation happens online. So it's one of the things that I'm trying to communicate a lot is I think it all starts within the people that work for the organization. And that's part of brand management and brand perception. That one good deed that you do for that individual coming that day to you could mean a lot for them and change someone's perception. But the more we do it, the more we change perception online, the less conversation we have online about how bad the government entity is. And I'm gonna. This is a good story, but an ugly story on brand perception. It was the Department of Home Affairs, funny enough, where it was an individual that complained about a service. And it went viral because it was an individual, included Department of Home Affairs into the picture. It went viral because of an individual. And one of the things when you look at the training themes in terms of conversation that led or that took part into the whole conversation it was based on one person. So the name of the individual came out a lot. So unfortunately, the department just was dragged into all of it, but it was all because of one individual. So it's just service delivery, I guess, starts with an individual, but it goes into, or rather, it affects your brand perception as well from an online space. There we go. I think in terms of customer story, this is quite a success story that we do for SA Tourism. So we just had this discussion where I just said, why isn't SA Tourism and brand SA in one group? For me, it's the one thing, right? You're all promoting the brand South Africa, but got the gist of how important it is to separate the two. But while working with South Africa, SA Tourism, one of the things that we were able to assist them with is picking up all the conversation online on how the brand's being perceived. And one of the things we also tracked was when they had a certain campaign, how is that fixed into the whole picture and how has the brand perception changed since we had a campaign around this specifically. So we were able to, the social listening, we were able to give them a global report and overview of how they're being perceived, as well as their different stakeholders, how they also impact the whole brand perception for specifically SA Tourism. And of course, you guys can imagine the whole incident with Tottenham Hotspur, how that completely, I remember from one day to another, changed the sentiment completely, 360, or 180 rather, into a more negative. So these are just some of the things we're helping clients like SA Tourism, where we just listen on all conversation. And you can imagine SA Tourism, the volume of content that they get on a daily basis, right? I think we're sitting at about 100,000 per day. This is an account where it became so big where we had to add more resources, people resources onto it because we just couldn't keep up with the volume of data being pulled through. Then, in terms of viral and trending conversation, I think this for me ties back into the crisis management side, right? When a post goes viral, when a tweet goes viral, what your stakeholders, what your MECs are saying. It's so important what they're saying has an impact on the whole entity as a whole. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this is very much connected to the crisis management side. this is one of my favorite, and I'm going to be biased, this is one of my favorite government entities, that's to say. For walking in, the experience walking into their buildings, I love going there. I purposely asked them to go see them face to face. But they have the most amazing offices, but just how they operate and how the team, and I think someone said something about ageism earlier. This is, for me, one of the few departments in government that's moved that out of the way and allowed the youngsters to step in and actually have a voice. It is so refreshing how they take the social data, understand online perception, understand how the engagement looks like on the different social channels, because that's also another thing, is what your Facebook audience look like versus Instagram, TikTok, completely different. Very different. So what they've done is they've used the insight of understanding how the different audiences are and created content based on these different audiences on the different channels. And navigating misinformation, one of my favorite. The importance of understanding and identifying news early on is crucial. Remember, from a marketer standpoint, we are monitoring text and image, right? So if someone's going to say, Department of Water, love your service. That's it. Or let's say Department of Water, pipe leak in Randburg, right? Or Rand Water, pipe leak in Randburg. We're going to pick up the name Rand Water and leak in Randburg. But if it's false news and you know about the issues that Randburg had over the last few days, you can quickly change the narrative and actually respond directly to these individuals saying, listen, this has been solved, and if it hasn't, we can work on this with you. But the problem is it's now online. It's online, it stays there unless they actually delete it themselves. It's online, people are seeing this misinformation, and it just turns into a potential crisis that could have been avoided before it went viral, but just nipping it in the bud, excuse my language, before it went viral. So this is something as well that we assist our clients with by helping identify those misinformation content and conversation, and extracting all those information, allowing you to engage rather with the audiences or whoever that person was that posted, and of course analyzing as to whether this had an impact or negative impact on your brand or not. So Code for Africa is one of our Kenyan clients. They launched a new product 3 years ago. So they launched a new product 3 years ago, and someone, it was a fake account that posted false news. This product doesn't allow Visa cards to break payments. Something around that. And that went viral because this new product was on the fact that Visa cards can use this new system. And that misinformation, again, Twitter or X, and then people at times, it allowed us to pick that conversation up immediately and send it back to go back and say, hey, heads up, this is what someone's been saying, it's been reshaped over 1,000 times. I know it's just 1,000, but this 1,000 could turn into multiple millions in hours. So we allowed them, or rather help them pick up all this conversation and actually mitigate it before it turned into something much more worse than what it was supposed to be. But if you could, I think just 5 main key takeaways. South Africa is the #1 internet user, right? And social listening provide a key information source. Fake news being sensationalized by journalism, and stay ahead with your social listening. Be aware of critical insights, crisis insight in real time via AI, and measure the sentiment of your brand to understand the perception of your citizens. But also, most importantly, real-time monitoring of much data as possible, and this will use away of any brands from which you potentially. Thank you so much. It's 30 minutes.
You were just a tad over, but we forgive you. Are there any questions for Dumi?
Yes. I knew you were going to ask a question.
So, on the stats, back to the stats, which say South Africa is one of the highest, with the highest.
Internet users. Yeah.
Please go back to that.
Yes. I can actually.
Okay. The barometer, whatever that is, indicate exactly what we use it on leisure, maybe sending applications that were very high rate of unemployment, so maybe that's high internet use. Did it say really what we spend a lot of time doing?
Yeah. So the report, the 300 pages does go into there in terms of what the time was spent on, but most of the time it's been on social media, right? And it also goes into detail of what do you do on social media. So is it brand searching, news searching, what is it? So the report will give you a detailed overview of exactly what the activities are of that.
So did you get what? Yeah.
Specifically for South Africa, yeah.
Social media.
Yeah, social media. The thing about data, guys, is it's I always say data is online data, content is free, right? Anytime, and I always say this to people, anytime you sign up to a new app, we all just accept. Third parties like ourselves can, and this is public data, right? We are allowed to pick up any conversation that individual says, unless you put yourself on private, then we can't monitor you because that's illegal. But this is public data. All this information is available and free for us to use. And also we also understand that data is gold. Data is absolutely crucial. I always say that it takes away the guessing game. We don't want you to guess anymore. There's no point in you guessing when do I need to post in order to gain maximum engagement with my people. We now can tell you, listen, your people are doing lunchtime 12 to 1, the most engaging, or most of them are online. So put out that lunch post. Make a fun meme about it. Like there's so many creative ways to get that maximum engagement out of it. We're taking away the guessing game, or the guesswork, rather.
So never mind the point that was made earlier that data is not equally available for a lot of people in South Africa.
Data or content? I'm speaking
Sorry,
content.
I mean, not data. Internet access. I find it a bit.
I think a lot of people question our report, for lack of a better word. But if you look at also, one of the things we do highlight is the provinces with the most internet usage. Now, Gauteng definitely uplifted those numbers. There's definitely more access in Gauteng than all the other provinces. And that's where we think the numbers were bolstered up from. Because it's completely different. Also in the report, it goes down into the different provinces. It's completely different if you look at the likes of Limpopo or Eastern Cape. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, in your research, do you perhaps know which electronics or cell phone brands are people using?
I don't know this specific report, but I know we have done something because, funny enough, we had both Huawei and Apple as a client. And one of the things they did ask was to see what is globally being used. I'm an Apple fan, so I'm going to be biased and say most likely more Apple I like. But yeah, that number I don't have in front of me.
I'm asking because the movie cell is basically right that when people access the internet use movie cells, especially in your lower income.
In your lower income areas,
yes.
yeah.
So I was wondering and us reaching them, when you create content for them, because obviously the picture of movie cells not so great.
Yeah.
So what do you on certain movie cells?
Do you have any movie cell users?
From what I've seen, from the movie cells I've interacted with, let me just say yeah, but even when you look at the LCD screen of it, so when you think about content, is reaching them, creating content for such specifics.
How do you do it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a question that we can go on and on about. But what are the social media channels that we've seen increase and where businesses are using a lot is WhatsApp. WhatsApp is available to everyone, even the mobile cells. Jeez, I'm sorry if anyone's I'm going to be hit on this, but WhatsApp is one of the communication channels that can also be used to content create. Right? And again, go back to the graphics, the image, how do you do it? That's a discussion you can, and it's an exercise that you need to do first, understanding if that platform is the right platform to use for your audiences. Right? So don't have a right answer for you right now because I think it goes far more in depth into that. Any more questions?
Maybe last one?
Yes.
Okay. At what point should maybe a small business consider your services? At what point on the journey? Yeah.
So it's a tough question to ask or to answer because content online is free and readily available. And for a startup, if you just understood where and what your competitors are doing, where your audiences are based, what exactly your audiences are looking for in your specific product, how can you stand out from the Vodacoms and MTNs of the world in order to be that niche product? You need data to put together that strategy. Is it cheap? No, right? But what we've done specifically for the African market, because we're a global entity, right? For the South African market, we've really customized and put together, we call them an NGO package. Because that's one of the things we started seeing a lot happening in Africa. So a lot more NGOs wanted to understand what people saying about us. And if you look at NGOs, they have to report back to their donors and say, look what we've done, thank you Peugeot, or BMW, Peugeot's not anymore. Thank you BMW, this is what you did for us, look at the engagement, look at the ABE, look at the reach. So we've started seeing NGOs, but we also understood that NGOs cannot pay what a multi-choice is paying. Yeah, there's no reason. Right, so that's something that we actually since last year, we've looked at putting together management. So when should someone start? In an ideal world, in my eyes, would be as you getting into the game. If you understand, again, it also depends on what service or product you're offering, right? If it's something that's saturated and there's just so much of it, you really want to stand out. So in order to stand out and knowing that an online or social platform is where you're actually going to get business, you have to invest in the insights.
One more question.
Yes.
When you guys do social listening, have you, for governments in particular, have you noticed certain pattern in perceptions or around using pictures of government officials or what is people have a positive,
Negative perception now.
Yes.
So without offending anyone, I think as a whole, there's only been, and I'm biased, right? I'm going to say status, I'm very biased. Every time status say comes up with a new report, when they say stuff, people love them, right? We've seen more neutral and positive than negative. I don't want to lie to you and say it's a positive outlook. It's not. And if I just say yes, that Department of Water has a more positive sentiment online than Department of Health, I'll be lying to you. I'll just be spitting out words just to give you an answer. So I think when it comes to governments in South Africa as a whole, because one of the exercises we also did for the Office of the President is we had to give them an overview of the different departments, how are they being perceived, and we benchmark them against each other. It was very much similar. To say, like now and again, one would have more obviously than the other, but to say that there was a lot of positive, I would not. There was
teachers of principal allowance.
It all depends on what's happened.
Currently, the local premier she's made the department or the provincial social media account or Twitter account her face instead of the logo of. I cannot advise because we're not an agency, right? I cannot advise on what you should and should not do, right? If it works for your people, it works. But sentiment-wise, my thing about With social media, you get engagement, demographics, sentiment-wise,
How are you being
the
perceived?
politicians who head departments. Is it a positive or negative thing? Because then that gives us direction in whether we should be using less pictures or more pictures.
Yeah.
In terms of
Again, I cannot give you more pictures advice. It's not a data. You collect data, and based on if I had data, I would tell you choose the paper, turn it into a generic overview, right? Don't have the pictures. But I cannot give you that advice. What I can on a personal comment is it's ever changing, right? Your head of states or your head of departments are ever changing, right? They're political roles. So to maintain almost consistency in how the people perceive you, it shouldn't always be tied up to but premium or like Department of Health BC Kofi, which I love, is there. I'm gonna say good things about her. It's a very tricky one. It all depends on who's there, what's been said about them in the past. You take it away. If it's always been negative about, and that's one of the things we can maybe as an exercise that one can do is they can plug in your previous name into the system and look at how they've been perceived. If it's a negative perception, remove. So it's not an easy question for me to answer. It all depends on what the data tells me. Remember, I'm a data person, a content person. So what the content and data tells me is what I will always advise you to do.
So what if the president said what we
I
say?
think this conversation is wrong. I think it's a good, I think it's a good conversation.
And you want to cut me off?
Yes. Yes. A round of applause for you. So do we really enjoy ourselves? And you really enjoy it. Yes. Thank you so much.
My people are supporting me, that's what I'm asking.
Thank you so much, Louis. In fact, we had just one question online. How did you assess the level of social awareness of digital leadership and strategic communication to reshape the organizational culture? So it's not to you as such, because this is not more a data question, but it's almost a general question. I thought that it's important that we acknowledge this question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I maybe can do is, if any of the audiences want to have a one-on-one question or
Yes.
session, I'm very happy to do that. And then we just plug in the data, right, or the content, because then I can give you a better answer. Right, give you the topic of concern, and then we do an exercise, rather than me just blabbing out words just for the sake of it.
Is it at a cost?
I don't know, it's fine. I'll do it just because of you.
You must never tell me only for the ones who stayed behind.
Yes!
The rest, they must not get free, they must pay.
And only for those who bought the sweaters.
And no emotional blackmail. We are just expressing what people.
Thank you so much, guys.
So I just want to quickly go back. We are wrapping up now. I'm standing between you and the holy waters. So let me not be that guy. So I want to come back here. Yes, right. Remember, I shared this earlier around the fact that government communicators, at some point, you were the gold standard, right? And South Africans did say that. This is not something, again, it's to data and research, right? Where on an annual basis, government is the least trusted institution. 2020, January, we were the least trusted institution. But in May, same year, we were the most trusted. In fact, we were the only one who grew by double digits, if you look at the numbers. And what does Jay-Z say? Not the MK party one. Right? He says, numbers don't lie, check the scoreboard. And the scoreboard is saying to all of you in this room that if we are consistent, if we put out the right kind of content, if we agitate for comms to be a strategic function, if we we do the right things, we go for training, we utilize platforms such as Meltwater to ensure that we are ahead of the curve, because the biggest pieces that came out of this presentation is we need to be ahead of the curve, right? We can get back there, right? But importantly, and again, this from the same report, right? It says that there are many things as communicators we can't do. We can't patch potholes. We can't. So when somebody reports a pothole, that there's a pothole or there's a pipe leak, the best thing that we can do is to provide good information. And the earlier slide is talking to that, to say that's majority of what government communicators did. That is how we increase trust. We literally communicated consistently, authoritatively, credibly, and we took our space.
Sure.
So we need to take up space, right? We take up space with good information. Data says that it closes the social divide. We accept that South Africa is the most unequal society in the world. But when we empower people, when somebody goes to a clinic and they find out that, oh, by the way, this clinic is going to close at 1 and therefore it means I will not get service. Imagine if they had known that before they woke up very early in the morning, and simple communication, right? They would have then planned their day differently, or they would have gone to a different clinic to access the same service. So we have an exceptionally important role. I need to make a quick announcement. So Madalane has lost her black notebook. Or did she found it? Okay, great. And then another announcement, SABC. Not only because they are our partner, but it's important that we also support SABC. One, we must pay the TV licenses. It's the right thing to do. And this is not because they are our partners. It is the right thing to do. But secondly, and most importantly, I'm asking all of you, if you do not have the SABC app on your phone, please, there's the banner outside. Just scan the QR code and download the app. And again, to one of our supporters, Gauteng Tourism Authority, let's download the GP Lifestyle app as well to experience Gauteng a little bit better, at our fingertips. On the Gauteng Gauteng Tourism Authority tip, we have a winner. We have a winner. So it was there were 2 people who did better than all of you. All of you combined. But in that language, all of. Right? Yes. So our winner for the GTA, many randelas is Moroman to say Tabile Mkha. Tabile Mkha is not in the room, but Tabile did the most yesterday. In fact, maybe to me, we should have actually put the 2 through some sort of data thing, so you tell us, which one's really, engaged. But Tabile Mkha walks away with the price of 30,000 rand. Right? So we are people who are true to our words. And as I now, as we now finalize, we said that there are 5 things that we're looking at, right? Leadership, and it came out a lot in this room. Many people were, lamenting about particularly political principals, taking communicators seriously. And I think it's a good takeaway and an important thing to think about. How do we, this has been a complaint or at least a gripe for the longest time, right? But there should be a way where we think about how do we get leaders, senior managers to understand and comprehend the value of digital communications and social media, right? I think one of the things that we need to do as a collective, right, is that just like there's a course called Finance for Non-Financial Managers, because you see what they try to do is to say, so you here you are, you have a master's in communication, but you need to know and understand what the bottom line means. What they then do is to say, we are going to take you through a course that is called Finance for Non-Financial Managers, right? Because they want you to get it. Perhaps that is what we need to agitate for. Communications for non-communication managers. Because we have ops people, we have CFOs who are making decisions on budgetary decisions for comms. And that is why when they think about it, they just say, no, you can just cut. Right? But perhaps when they go to this course and we make sure that we agitate for it to be mandatory. Just like finance for financial managers, it's actually mandatory at a certain level. Right? And I think that if we do that, we'll be in the right track. And you can be sure that we are going to be speaking to Professor Amanda Hadebe at the University of Johannesburg. Something is likely to come up, and I'm not committing it, but I'm just saying that that should be one of our agitations. I think it deserves a round of applause. If you are not clapping for that agitation, at least clap that I'm looking damn. The second thing, right? Skills and capacity. The second panel dealt around skills, right? Of course, capacity is one thing, and it's important that people are going with continuous training. But I think the one other thing that we should agitate for. So if you look at other professions, right, there's a standard where people need to go on, or maybe let me moonwalk. I get the young people, that's what they say. When they say, let me go back a little bit, let me moonwalk. When you try to go back, no, you are not the young people that are inside. You maybe need to digress. My wife of 22 years this year. Yes, I'm married 20 now. Is a clinical psychologist, right? One of the things that she has to do yearly is that, and it's required by the Health Protection Council of South Africa, that she must do an ethics course that has CPT, that ends at CPT points, right? You see what they're doing is that they're not taking it for granted that you are a professional. And by the way, she's been a psychologist this year now for 16 years. She's 45. Yes, I'm 2 months older. But anyway, the point is, they are not leaving things to chance. But when you look at comps, there are many things that we've left to chance. And that is why you will have, by the way, she has blocked me, Dr. Popira Matuba in Limpopo, where there is no standard. Yes, because I wrote a stinging article. Right? That's why I was blocked. But people are not there. There is no standard in terms of what are the things that are minimum requirements that as communicators we should be living up to. And from a skills point of view, I think that is the other thing that we need to do, where when we have a social media manager, there's a certain level of skill that social manager, over and above, of course, you must just be a good human being. Right, of course, that you can't regulate, but the point here is that we really need to be agitating for this, and I know that Puti is very passionate about this, and I know that there's a new president-elect now, but PRISA should be at the forefront of championing this cause, right? The third one is digital strategy and culture, right? Dr. Karabo spoke about just thinking about when you're thinking about an AI in public sector and government communications. If you were to ask anyone in the room now, how many of you have an AI-focused digital strategy? The likelihood is that none, right? So it means that there's a culture shift that needs to happen. We know that AI is here. We know that AI is advancing at a fast pace, right? But we don't have a strategy, right? Madalani talks about that ordinarily, if you look at many of the communication strategies, they have a lifespan of 3 years, right? But she said because she acknowledges that things are changing ever so fast, her strategy changes every 2 years, right? So it therefore means that there's mindfulness around there's a particular culture that we need to adopt, that we then need to recognize that, unlike, other people, there are many external factors that determine how we need to be responsive, right? The fourth one, collaboration, experimentation, and innovation. Rihanna spoke about collaboration, and a few other speakers as well spoke about collaboration. It can never be overemphasized. In fact, I was giving a talk to the MLOs Forum, National MLOs Forum, right? About 28 of them in the room, and we were talking about how can they give the economic recovery plan weeks, right? And I said, let me start here. There are about 5 of you who are from the economic cluster. Before I started the session, I just did a desktop search. All of you, or none of you, are retweeting the other. So there's an absence of collaboration, right? So here you are at DTIC. Another one is at DPE, right? We know that we're the same, our ministers are in the same class. And I'm talking about people who speak directly to the minister, who are working with the minister, right? So they should at least be saying, there was an interministerial committee that sat, where I know that these 5 ministers were in the room. But when the communicators walk out of the room, none of the other cares about what the other is doing, right? And I say, how do you expect the public to have confidence in your content when your colleagues don't have confidence? Because that's the quickest way to show people that you don't have confidence in their work, right? So collaboration is going to start with that, right? In our spaces, we need to be sharing the right kind of content, right? We need to be sharing content of other colleagues. Experimentation, particularly around what and ask this to those who did not attend the COJ breakaway, right? Many people, they were, it was, wow, there's so much out there, and right, and it's that. City of Johannesburg, majority of how they get to where they get to is experimentation. If you speak to TK, when you have a moment with him, he will tell you how many brick walls he has had to hit. Because someone will be telling him, no, this is not within, our IT, mandated scope. Someone will then be telling, if it's not the money, it's something else. If it's not, but what he does is that he never stops to experiment. Of course, within reason, right? And then the last one is really investment that is required, right? One of the things that PR people do to try and show our value is to use AVE. And we know that it's crooked, that thing. It's crooked. But clients are happy, and both internal and external clients are always happy to see AVE as a measurement of return on investment, right? The advantage with data that is from digital platforms is that to a great extent, you can actually look at the APIs, no, not APIs, IP addresses, right? So you can even tell. Anyway. Yes. Anyway, you can easily see when you spend 5,000 rands, which people spoke to you, in which area, majority, and you can even tell their age, or at least their demographics, right? But if you think about, if you spend an ad in the Sowetan, and I'm not decampaigning traditional media, right? It's guesswork in terms of who saw your story, who read your story, and if they actually read the story. Right? But with digital, it's a definite. But of course, people like ourselves also acknowledge that we have bigger challenges, right? Challenges such as we're working with an agency now of government. When we had to buy ads, they would not give us their credit cards, right? Because remember, with Meta, you must insert somebody's credit card to buy those ads, right? Now, now that, and all of it was, we can't do it because PFMA, right? And then they want the codes. There's only one Meta. But you see the point that I'm making. One of the things that we should then be doing is to say, listen, this is not a new problem. In fact, we found a solution to it, deviation. So there's a sense of not sharing knowledge, not sharing experiences, where our colleagues now get to say, but this is a problem that we can actually solve, right? So we must always be thinking about what are we solving for? So we really need to increase the monies. And what I liked about community media is that there was a set 30% where ordinarily there should be 30% that must be spent on community media from an advertising point of view, right? And the question to the room now is, should we not be agitating for, we must start with a baseline for social media to say, at least a certain percentage of the comms budget must be spent on digital, right? And I am then looking at the SIU team and saying, one of the things that I think you must start doing is to start packaging how the numbers are looking in terms of engagement, what kind of content people are engaging with, and many other insights, right? So that colleagues can then see this thing in living color. Because I think that's the other thing that is missing, right? Where package best practices, package case studies, and share them with colleagues. At that point, I'd like to say to all of you and say, we are truly, truly grateful that you've spent the past 2 days with us. For us, it is it's absolutely heartwarming that communicators can take 2 days out of their time, and we're asking you to mark your calendars already. 26 and 27 June 2025, we will be gathering again for the next. I think it deserves a and no, Rabadet. He said we don't have 86 because people pay their rents and cents, so people are paying. And to our sponsors, Good Governance Africa, Meltwater, Cowden.
What am I coming here to do?
Oh.
It's been a long 2 days. I'd like to both thank you. As for the forgiveness that we went past the time, but thank you very much for being here. I'd like to thank our sponsors. Who has mentioned so I don't mention them again? No, Cowden Tourism Authority, Meltwater, Print SA, the National Film and Video Foundation, SAPC, DKMS, Good Governance Africa, GCIS. They made this possible because you guys did not pay. So thank you very much. Our great partner, the University of Johannesburg. Not only because they co-curated this thing, but also to make sure that it happens in this venue and happens so well. Thank you very much. To our speakers and our panelists and our presenters, Absolutely, this would not have happened without you, right? The content is what we bring, and you brought the content. We just were the conductors of it. So thank you to each and every one of you. Of course, all of you in the room and those virtual, thank you for your bravery. I hope it was worth it. Do remember this. This is going to be a major calendar event in this country and one day in this continent.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll be glad that you were part of it in this early age.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a last but not least, to the Decode team. Our amazing team, please all rise. This team that was just everybody. We are completely proud of you. You have done an amazing job, and you will see it as we go forward. Thank you so much. And finally, to my partner in crime, the brains behind this, Lord Senke. Thank you, my brother. I'd like to invite you all downstairs for a drink and a snack, but I shall only allow in there if you put a sweater.